There is just about everything going right
I like that.
possibly go with a transition and a transition, um, a physical transition, a psychological transition
Mm-hmm.
to a place that is unorthodox to me. Like people wake up and they go just like anywhere else. But it is so foreign. So maybe foreign is the word, not unorthodox.
Hmm.
Just waking up, I live on like a 70-acre horse farm, and in one of my so I have two balconies. On one side, it is where the horses kind of graze and where they're able to like run around, and maybe like
Mhm.
100 yards away from where I live on this property, there's the horse stable. And then on the other side, it's like a main property where the property owners live. And then in the background, it's like the green, massive, not massive, but they are massive because if I stood next to them, then I'd be, you know what I mean? They're like, yep, that's massive. It's not like the largest mountain I've ever seen, but the closest I've ever lived to mountains like that,
Mm-hmm.
where I could hike to the top of it. Maybe I could get to the base of the mountain in probably like 15 minutes
Oh wow.
if I
So
walked.
from where you live, you could walk to the base of the mountain in 15 minutes.
Yeah,
That's pretty close.
that's pretty damn close, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried not to like, I'm still figuring out. So this stuff is foreign to me. It's absolutely beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's healing.
Mm.
Um, it's an easy place to reflect. It makes me think about, it makes me think about actually my father who lives in the country in Virginia, but I got him beat, which I never, ever, ever in my life would I thought. Like, I'm gonna live in a more rural area than
Yeah. Yeah.
what I've known for him to live in. So yeah, man, it's been a great move. Now, granted, I've only been here 2 weeks. 2 weeks yesterday.
Oh wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're super fresh then.
But everything is going like super smooth. I DJ'd at a spot on Wednesday.
Really?
I say, I mean, I used that not to like brag or anything, but I'm saying like I just moved and like that's how
Being connected.
yeah, like
Yeah.
yo, I mean, is there like I purposely went out a couple nights, like kind of roaming around, and I stumbled upon.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh yeah, like I'd love to like come out and spin, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. And they're like, oh yeah, yeah, come by Wednesday. What? Oh
Yep, just like that.
yeah, but smaller living, right? Like there aren't 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to DJ too. Yeah, I'm a DJ, so there's less politics.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so yeah, I found a barbershop, like a cool barbershop.
Really?
And I mean, all this stuff is about, like I said, I'm in a rural spot,
Yeah.
but
So you're doing good.
we could go on. If this podcast was about me, then we could go on and on. But
Listen, I don't know how it's not, but you
no,
know what I'm
it's supposed to be, well, okay, it's about both of us.
saying.
I want to hear you talk more than I talk about my experience. I mean, we'll get there. I'm sure it'll funnel its way into.
Yeah, but this is just the introduction, and you're there, it's fresh, it's new, capturing some of the aspects that you're really starting to get aware of. I'm just curious. And so
Yeah,
I was curious, like, what's after 2 weeks, like, what's the biggest or the most significant impact that you felt um, from the move itself?
that's a great question. Um, I would have to say my job has, and I know this is again, it's so strange to say this because I've always been one of those. I've always been one of those people who probably historically was never connected to my job enough. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
even when I was an aquatics director, and like swimming is my thing, and I love childhood development, and I love working with kids. I was never attached to that job in the way where I'm like, oh, it just,
mm,
like it, in a sense, it kept me going, but it wasn't fulfilling me. In It wasn't
mm.
fulfilling me to the level that in 2 weeks, I'm like, wow. But that's also part of my own development, right? And I
Yeah.
also, I mean, we'll get into this because this is actually a great transition into you, right? Like, there's jobs where I think there's jobs where people let it like let the job kind of consume them, but consume them, but it's not really what they want to do.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's an easy identifier. Like, oh, I noticed this more on the East Coast too, historically. Like, what do you do? And like what you do for a profession, yeah, pretty much is who you are. Like that's how people.
I think that's really just kind of how it is in a more ubiquitous way than you realize. It's not the East Coast as much as it's everybody else, except people in California maybe who are doing something different, like have a little bit more. Um, I don't know if freedom is the right word, but there's just so much over the last 50 years. California has just been a hub for all sorts of different innovation and change and all sorts of stuff. So I think maybe people just have this greater sense of development, like that I'm becoming or I'm moving into my greatest stuff or I'm changing or I'm growing.
Mm,
Just as a general thing, people go to LA to become something. People move to Silicon Valley to get established, to do something. Most of the rest of the country, you know, people are what they do.
mm,
You know what I'm saying? I'm a teacher. I'm a this, I'm a that. Like that's so the identity piece really is tied to your work because you spend most of your energy and time and effort doing the work. And you know, it's just fascinating to recognize that and and now to be sort of detached from that. Like, yeah. So it's interesting to hear you say that it's more prevalent on the East Coast. But I just think, having spent time in California myself and then, knowing that's where you're just coming from, it's like that piece of your identity isn't really about exclusively is about your work. But
yeah,
for other people, it is. Even if it's just their job, but they're still like, I'm a so and so,
you're
right?
right.
I
Yeah.
have my identity wrapped up in what I spend most of my time and energy doing.
Mm,
And I feel the propensity to even say that, or I have over the years to say that, like, or more accurately, I have battled with it internally because I didn't want to be whatever my job was.
right.
Like, I do this kind of work, but that's not who I am. I understand that I'm way more expansive as a human being than just this piece of work that I do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's an interesting topic too.
No,
I'm not sure if that's where you're
I'm
trying to take
glad
it.
I'm glad you said that. And the more I think about it, the more I think in preliminary conversation, like
Mm-hmm.
initial interaction, I think it's easier for people to connect. And maybe that's you know what, and maybe that's my own shit. When
Mm-hmm.
people asked me that initially, and that's how we were introduced, I'm like, oh yeah, there's more to me there's more to me than that, and yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you actually brought that up. So yeah, I'm thinking
Yeah,
more about my preliminary conversations with people. When I say the East Coast, you know, I think there's more because there's more exploration of identity, maybe more freedom to explore identity in California, like we were saying. That
mhm.
that maybe
Yeah,
productions are a little different, you know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, to a degree, but I think it's just less of a it sticks less.
Mm,
You know, California is still kind of like, I mean, it's the last place that people explored and developed because the development of the country was from east to west. And so the west was like this last frontier before you got to the ocean for this massive land.
sure.
And so people were going out there to create something new for themselves.
Mhm.
And so I think the people who land there, maybe, and this is just a theory, the people who land there just internally are like, I'm going there to become something else. So I'm not as tied to this identity of what I do necessarily. It's more of who I am ultimately that is dictating what I do. Instead of the other way around, where people are crafting their identities from the time that they're young based on what they want to do when they grow up. And then whatever they land in, they think that that's what they are. And it speaks a lot to some of the crisis that happens when people lose their jobs or when people um, change, and the grief that comes from that. I experienced some of that, like um, and I don't know when we're getting into what, but historically, being a police officer, um, it's easy to get an identity around that kind of work because it does kind of consume your whole person. um, and there's several reasons for it, but I remember when I left, when I got out of law enforcement after 10 years, that uh, there was something of, like, for the people who did esteem it, there was this sort of detachment from the esteem of, like, me being able to say I was a detective. And I just sat with it. I just let it be. I knew I was still, moving toward greater freedom and greater expression of who I am more fully. But yeah, it's still, even for me, somebody who was consciously stepping out of something, I still had to let the identity fall away.
Mm.
And it's significant. And I think that the most of the world, at least most of the Western world, is like that. And I don't think it's healthy necessarily, but it's just sort of the dynamic that we get to experience coming up in this culture.
So I'm glad we transitioned to um your time as a police officer. So let's backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
What brought you to police work? Was this something, were you the kid who grew up and was like, I know I'm going to be a cop, like
Nah.
your family cop? I mean, this is interesting. You Yeah, I'm interested to hear kind of what brought you to that work. And we brought
so
yeah. Yeah.
so it's real interesting, actually, in retrospect, and there's several reasons why. Part of the reason it's interesting is because I didn't remember thinking about it much as a kid. I did have a fascination with being a detective, and that was because I just felt like I was curious about things. I was interested in solving puzzles or problems, or um, so that kind of thing. That it was more my tendency to want to look deep into the aspects of whatever I was doing. I wanted to discover something, or I wanted to, you know, break a case or whatever. It's
Yeah.
like I was always watching mysteries, always trying to figure out what was going on beforehand. So this fascination with the unknown, or the uncovered, or the unrevealed,
Yeah.
or not the uncovered things that are shrouded in some way,
Sure.
mystery, um, has always been where I've leaned toward. So I remember saying that I wanted to be a detective when I was younger.
Okay.
Didn't really think about it too much. It was just like, oh, that would be dope.
Yeah.
So, um, hold on one second. I'm sorry. with the idea that I liked that way of being.
Yep.
I didn't actually consider what it meant to be a police officer. But fast forward,
Mm,
maybe in my early 20s, this is after I was married, had a baby. I was looking for ways to really serve my community. I grew up in inner city, Kansas City, you know, typical blighted, uh, drug ridden, crime. I won't even say crime ridden. It's the sense of being crime ridden neighborhoods. I mean, I grew up, I remember seeing the drug house across the street. I lived kind of on a side street for most of my childhood,
uh,
where there were like four houses on the side street, and the one that was across the street next to this huge vacant lot, it was a drug house. I remember seeing guys walking around there with, automatic weapons, or like shit that scared me, obviously. And I remember spending most of my childhood feeling paranoid of those kind of things taking place. Um, I even had one incident where uh, my sister and my cousin, who had lived with us at the time, were taking a walk, and they came home, and I'm just like coming down the stairs, and all of a sudden somebody shoots through the door, and I
mm,
was like 10,
mm,
and so I had an encounter with, the violence that's prevalent in a urban core black neighborhood in
uh,
the 90s, late 80s, whatever. But I never thought like, oh, I want to be a cop so that I can help this. But by the time I got to my, early 20s, I had actually gone to college. I went to the Moody Bible Institute, and I was studying pastoral studies. Not that I ever really wanted to be a vocational pastor, but I was just sort of following this path that was put in front of me gradually. Um, and when I thought about how to take care of a community or something,
mhm,
I actually saw policing as part of that.
mm,
It was like this stewardship of a community. And so when I was thinking about how I wanted to live, how I wanted to spend my time and energy, it was helping rebuild the community that I grew up in, that suffered whatever ills it suffered. And so I saw it strictly as this means to have a positive impact on my city.
mm,
Um, and so, you know, took a solid 3 months though of deprogramming my mind of all these negative images of police. I never had any negative run-ins with police for real,
mm,
personally,
yeah.
but I literally spent 3 months decompressing these ideas that are just intrinsic in the culture, because I was like, I'm gonna have to be that dude.
Mm,
And I remember having a conversation with my little brother who passed away back in, I think, 2011, where he was just like, "You really want to do that?" Like, because I'm like 24 or 5 at the time or something like that. And the earliest you can become a police officer, at least around um, where I was from,
yeah.
was like 21. And
Okay.
so I was a few years past that, a little bit more mature, a little bit more, I think I was 26 by the time I graduated the police academy. But I saw it as a means of serving my community to help it improve over time. I found out, after a short while, I mean, maybe 6 years or so, that wasn't a means to do that. And I don't believe that law enforcement is a means of actually having a positive impact on communities, specifically because of the nature of law enforcement. But I said it was strange because I never really thought of it.
Yeah.
But later in my career, um, I became, I was in some training in the police academies, leadership academy stuff. So this is like higher level um, classes, because everybody has to go through in-service training, obviously. So we take classes at the academy throughout the year. And then there's a leadership academy, which was a little bit higher, like mindset stuff, uh, more practical leadership stuff. And the guys who were the instructors for that used to be DARE officers.
Mm,
And so I didn't know this, but in one of these classes that I was in, one of the guys circulated, one of the guys from my high school, another black dude, he sent these photos to us from when we were in this either DARE, or there was also GREAT, which was gang resistance, education, and training.
okay.
So I remember the summer after, like the 7th or 8th grade or something like that. And I was just a part of this program. The officers came and picked us up, took us, and I don't even remember anything that we did, but I saw this photo later. And the instructors of the class were the guys who were in the photo. They were the police officers in the photo. So they were like 20 something years later, closer to retirement, but they were doing their trainings. And they were like, yeah, I remember you back then. Like, you were talking about being a police officer then. You were talking about being a detective. And I had no memory of it at all. So I was like, yo, that's crazy.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's so yeah, moments like that. I actually had a moment like that earlier today where I was contemplating about like, how did I get to this point? Like, how did you get there? Like, what was
Yeah.
it? Were there any signs? So the
Hmm.
first thing I could think about really is DJing, and I haven't DJed, but I started DJing 4 years ago.
Mm.
I remember the first Fisher Price record player that I got, and I remember going and taking my parents' vinyls and tearing them shits apart. I remember my dad coming in like, "What the hell are you doing to my damn records?" I was like, "Oh man, I was trying to be a DJ." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I never pursued it after because whatever for whatever reason, like maybe hearing like, "What the hell are you doing?" I don't know, but it's so funny to think
Yeah.
about. Like, I can go back to that moment
Yep.
and think about like, oh yeah, so you were kind of like that. You were interested in it, and just so happens 34 years later, you're like, oh yeah, I want to pick that back up.
Yep.
But you've got
Yeah.
a
Just looking at the little seeds and things that
yeah here
go
yeah.
ahead.
No, 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 no. I didn't mean to cut you off. I think yours is much more unique just based off of the type of work. I mean, being a DJ, being a DJ is a little less repercussion than a detective in a police department. And yeah, so you go to, I don't want to go too far into it, but it's interesting to hear you talk about wanting to be a leader in the community, and I think you went down one route by pursuing um, education to prepare you to be. Was the goal to be like a pastor or?
No. So again, when I took pastoral studies at the school I went to, I didn't have an aim to be a pastor. I actually was kind of against the idea of being a vocational pastor. I just saw that as the most uh, preparatory thing that I could do to do the kind of work that I thought I would be doing, which is tending to people, taking care of people.
Yeah,
Um, so it is interesting.
yeah,
And something like that, where like I literally, that's so it wasn't even that I wanted to be a leader in the community as much as a caretaker.
mm-hmm,
And so it's interesting that I saw policing as that thing,
mm-hmm,
like standing in the gap between what people needed and what they could get. And actually that's how I operated. I
yeah,
was always trying to really connect people with what they needed, but the nature of law enforcement is reactive, and
mm-hmm,
so you're really only showing up after shit goes hits the fan. And
yeah,
so it's really difficult in that kind of scenario to really care for people in the way that I was envisioning, which was supposed to be constructive or productive rather than just keeping the worst thing at bay, you know what I'm saying? Or showing up to clean up the mess afterwards. And
mm,
so, you know, that plays into how I've lived my life pretty much the whole time,
yeah,
which was seeing myself as somebody who not just wanted to have a positive impact on people, but actually just really care for people.
yeah,
Uh, and so, yeah, it's interesting to see. And I didn't, again, I wasn't the kind of kid that I was like shoot 'em up, bang bang, or I didn't want to like catch bad guys or any shit like that. It was like I wanted to really care for people and help rebuild a city. I
Sure.
wanted to rebuild a community. Um, yeah, that's fascinating to think about, especially right now.
Yeah. So, what were the examples that you saw? Because I think we tend to have examples in our life of
Yeah,
what care is, right?
that's a good question. That's a good question.
Um,
And immediately when you asked that, what came to mind was my grandfather.
okay.
You know, by the time I came around, he was in his 60s, I think. I think he died when I was 20. Yeah, probably like 26,
Yeah.
25, 26, somewhere around there.
You spent some.
And
You had a considerable amount of time um, in a relationship. 25.
yeah, yeah. So he was in his 80s at that point. So, by the time I showed up, he was well into it. He was in his 60s. But he was the guy that I saw that he was real chill, but everybody in the community kind of leaned on him.
Mm,
And they called him Mr. C, on the block. And my grandparents, they were these people that, in urban core in Kansas City, they were like one of the first black families to move into this neighborhood because prior to, a certain time, prior to the 50s, black people couldn't live south of a certain street.
yeah.
And so once that stuff kind of opened up, so it was like the early 50s. I think my mom was born in 58,
Okay.
and they moved in just a little while before that, like maybe a year or so before she was born. And so they're the first black family in this neighborhood. But then by the time I get around, of course, it's an all black neighborhood, and or mostly black neighborhood. And the role that they played in that community connected with people, you know, people just depended on them for stuff. And it wasn't like, what, money or anything like that. It was just love. And
Yeah.
they always provided this haven for
Mm,
folks.
mm,
Uh, they've made really great friends with their next door neighbors. The other black family that moved in, I'm literally named after my grandfather and then the guy next door because he was like a father to my mom. You know
wow.
what I'm saying? So I'm named after both of them, and that's just the kind of impact that they had on the people that they loved.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like active caretaking where they were in other people's business. They just held this space that was like, we're gonna be together and we're gonna work shit out, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And so, um, however disjointed things were, they were just dependable in that way. And so those are the people I saw care. My mom directly, she used to take care of everybody. I think that's like her thing.
Yeah.
She was the youngest in her family. She had three older brothers, but she was still always taking care of folks. So I never consciously thought about that,
Mm,
but definitely that nurturing aspect comes through at least my mom's example. But as a man, having my grandfather be the only real prominent man in my life at the time, I
mm,
never thought about that, but that's probably it. You know what I'm saying? Just seeing him as the go-to guy for whatever, just in his regular lifestyle.
yeah.
Um, and I was never looking to be the go-to guy. I just always had it in my heart to really serve people.
Hmm.
So I just tried to do it in whatever way made sense at any given time. Um, yeah, that's really interesting. So that'd be the only example that I could really think of. Otherwise, um, yeah, I have no idea why I did that. Why I went into law enforcement because it was a great place of discovery for me of myself. It was one of the hardest things I had to do, especially early on, because I caught some hell. I think I never really consciously thought it was that,
Yeah.
but looking back on it, definitely. So I went through the police academy. I was the valedictorian of my police academy class. Um, but then I watched all of, or at least a good number of the black people that were in my class get either washed out during their
Mm,
break-in period, which is the period after they get out of the academy and they're on probation and they have a field training officer and all of that stuff. There are people who I thought were way more qualified in that respect than me that got washed out.
Mm.
like, you know, people who were in the military, um, people who had a solid background of some other kind,
When you say washed,
but they treated me like shit at the beginning.
when you say washed out, do you mean like,
Did I say what?
oh, sorry. When you say washed out, do you mean like, was this intentional? Like that they
So that's the idea, is that
okay.
there's some intention to get people out of the thing that aren't deemed suitable.
Mhm.
Uh, and so, honestly, and this is just my perspective in retrospect, but anybody who leaned toward or advocated for, and you know, people in the inner city in a positive way were kind of like other than what police culture was actually helping facilitate for. And this wasn't a conscious thing, but you just saw it because I looked around. I was like, why are these people getting like, why are they not here still?
Yeah.
But I had an experience where um, it happened to me. I had, this is just a quick story. I remember I was on break in. I was with my field training officer. He was a 7-year veteran at the time, kind of crusty, you know, disgruntled dude. He couldn't have been that old, honestly, maybe in his early 30s. But, you know, to me as a young guy, he was like older, more mature, more. He was my field training officer. He held the keys to my career
Yeah.
in his pen. You know what I'm saying? Um, but we had this one call, inner city neighborhood, close to where the neighborhood that I grew up in, and it was this old black man. I remember he was born in 1933.
Mm.
Long story short, he's this like kind of wiry but looks fit old man. I guess he had a really young girlfriend or something, and we get called on this disturbance. And as a new recruit, you're supposed to operate like you're just one person, even though you have your FTO, the field training officer, there.
Yeah.
So I was supposed to call another car to get somebody over there to do the call with me, because disturbance calls, you need at least 2 people. That's the policy that they had instituted. But he was like, we'll just handle it because everybody else was blacked out, meaning that everybody was on a call.
Yeah.
And so to not wait and to not be a burden for something that could be pretty simple, we just went in together. And he's kind of standing back, but he's acting like he's evaluating me instead of actually doing the call with me.
Mm.
And I'm talking to this old man, and he starts getting a little animated with his speech, where I asked him what's going on. You know, he's the only one on scene still, but apparently he had gotten into some argument with his girlfriend that was like decades his junior, because he was a older dude. He was born in 1933. I remember that shit. But I think his girlfriend was like 30s or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to him, and he's telling me what happened. He had taken the battery out of his truck so that she couldn't take the car, all this other stuff, just nonsense, just little silly stuff. Nothing that's really threatening, nothing really going on. My FTO pulls these vice grips out of his pocket, out of the guy's pocket from behind, because he had a different angle on him. And he pulls them out and shows them to me like I was supposed to see him, even though I'm not on that side. So why would I see?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then, as I'm having this conversation with the guy, he's getting animated. He's like, and she was just such and such, da 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 da. He's waving his hands like this. And I start to address him where I'm like, sir, if you're going to talk to me, you got to calm down. Like, that's literally what I was about to say. It's funny how I remember the details of this. And as I'm going like this to be like, sir, my FTO grabs him. And then all of a sudden they're wrestling on the ground. And so I'm like, what is going on? All right, what's happening here? And then FTO looks up at me from the ground. And he's like, well, aren't you going to help me get him in cuffs? And I was like, I guess so. I mean, you're already doing something. So I help him get him in cuffs. He's confused because he's like, what happened?
Why am I?
I'm confused because I'm like, what are we doing here? We end up running his name. I think he had like $150 warrant for like a parking ticket or something like that. And so because I'm in training, field training, everybody who has warrants goes to jail. That's the rule. So that I can get reps on actually booking somebody and doing all that kind of thing.
Okay.
So we take him to the station, which is like maybe half a mile away, not far. And my FTO, you know, he signature bonds him, which just basically means that he writes him a bond that he can have on his signature. Like he doesn't need to pay anything to actually get it. He can go to court for that ticket later or whatever. So literally, we arrest him, take him, he signature bonds him, and sends him walking back home.
Wow.
And so I'm like confused as to why this goes down, right? But I don't say anything. And then I have somebody come to me, and then he tells me that my captain wants to see me. And so it's the FTO, which is an officer, then there's the sergeant, and then there's the captain.
Okay.
So the captain wants to see me. I go in this office, and captain's talking to me, and it's a white female. And she's like, so would you say that your FTO used excessive force? Granted, it was only him and I there.
Yeah.
I hadn't said anything.
Yep.
And so now I'm in this office with my captain, and she's like, so would you say that your FTO used excessive force? And I was like, I wouldn't say that, but I would have handled it differently myself.
Sure.
And then she was like, so you think you a brand new officer know better than this 7-year veteran? And I was like, no, 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 no. I'm not saying that either. But I know my people, and I know he wasn't being threatening. He was just, and then she was like, what do you mean your people?
Mm.
And that phrase right there was the shit that turned everything around for my career from that point.
Mm.
Because every other call from that point on, I was literally just getting evaluated. But when she said, what do you mean your people? I
Yeah.
was like, oh shit, I guess I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
Because there's this thing in police culture where you're either in or you're out. So
Yeah.
if you don't fully assimilate, you're not in the in crew, right? Um, and so that marked me from that point on, where I was just being evaluated and not trained the rest of the time until another day. I don't know how many weeks later, I'm back in the office with my captain. She's like, so how do you think you're doing? And I was like, well, I'm doing pretty good. You know, I made some mistakes, but I never made the same mistakes twice and such and such. And then she's like, we don't think you're doing very good. We're going to recommend your termination. And so I was like, oh, shit. My career is about to go down the drain. Like I haven't even started and it's already done.
Mm-hmm.
Very next thing, this is at the beginning of a shift one day.
Yeah.
Very first thing, captain wants to see you. And then she tells me that they're going to recommend my termination. So then she tries to get me to resign because it's a lot harder to fire somebody than it is
Oh,
for them to quit, obviously.
yeah. Absolutely.
So I was like, I remembered before I even went to the academy, I had the good fortune of actually talking to a couple of older officers, sergeants or whatnot. They kind of just decided to have a lunch with me just to introduce me to the stuff, black officers.
Sure.
And one of them was a sergeant. And I remembered him saying this at that moment because he was talking and then he was just like, whatever you do, don't quit. And I was like, nah, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm choosing to do. I'm not going to quit, whatever. And so I was just kind of thinking that he was just meaning like, just don't give up on yourself. You know what I'm saying? As soon as she said that, where she was like, we're going to recommend your termination, but if you resign, you can retain your certification and maybe go somewhere. Like, I was like, what? So then those words popped in my head where he was like, whatever you do, don't quit.
Yeah.
I was like, oh. And so I just looked her in the face and I was like, I know I can do this job, so I'm not going to resign.
Yeah.
So then I had to go into a car with my FTO at that point, and he's playing buddy buddy with me for a second, where he's like, "Listen, man, this isn't for everybody. You know, maybe if you went to a smaller municipality, maybe it could work out better." And then I was like, "You can just talk to me man to man." You know, I was like 26, 27 years old,
Mm.
and I was 26, and I was like, "You can just talk to me like a man." And if you think that I'm not fit to do this job, why would you want me to do it somewhere else?
Wow.
And so then he was like, all right, well, I'm not going to help you anymore. And so he didn't let me use my computer in the car. He told me that he wasn't going to help me on any kind of calls. He told, like, so I was, and then I was just like, so you just hanging me out to dry? And he was like, yep. And so that experience right there was like one of the most defining moments for me to exert some courage in
Mm.
the face of something, because the very next thing, I got a call, the very next thing, right? This is the beginning of my shift. It's
Yeah.
a bus in an accident. Had never had an accident. There's all sorts of complications to it, complexities. And it's a bus, so it's a bunch of people, all these other things. And he starts helping me immediately.
Mm.
And so we finish up everything, call, and then I have to give a form to everybody who's there. So I go back to the car to get the form.
Yeah.
Well, when I pulled up to the call, I put my lights on in the street, and I'm in the middle of the street, in the middle of the roadway, put my lights on so people can slow down and move around or whatever. And I leave the key in the ignition because the car that I had, he told me that if you leave the lights on, the battery could die if the car is off.
Yeah.
So I left the keys in there. Well, when we get to the end of it and I need to go get a form from the car's gone. And I go looking for it. And I'm like, did you move the car? Like, what's going on? And he's like, no. He's like, you better hope somebody's fucking with you. And I was like, oh shit. They just told me they were going to recommend my termination. And I just got a police car stolen. So it turns out that some other officers had come and taken it
Wow.
during that time. But he had to have set that shit up.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise, why would you even feel like you had permission to do it?
Yeah.
Like, so that experience alone was like one of the craziest things that I had to deal with, where I was like, oh shit, all these other officers. And the only thing that saved my career was a black major at a different division coming in. And actually, because I was a valedictorian in my class, it got all the way up the chain of command, and they were like, I don't understand why he's not doing good, even though he did good here and such and such. So they put me with a different FTO and more experienced, longer term FTO. And he just gave a completely different report than the first one. The moral of the story is that the experience at the beginning of my career of that kind of treatment really helped me see the depth of the lack of assimilation and the effect that could have on a person.
Mm.
If you ain't in the in crowd, you just ain't in. Like, people don't trust you, whatever. And I ended up making a career that was fairly esteemed. I won some awards and all this other stuff, but I never assimilated.
Yeah.
Because if I had, I would have let go of that idea of really trying to have a positive impact on my world and just try to do some other shit that was either self-preserving or still thinking I'm hot shit and trying to go out and solve, big major crime rings or whatnot, which none of the shit is that complex. It's really this. Anyway, but I never defined myself as, and this is something that I got from the academy, because they were teaching this a little bit, where it was like, you got to have some other friends outside of this, otherwise it will consume you.
Yeah.
So circling back to that idea that the work that we do defines who we are, I had never fully embraced that. And honestly, I think it's what saved my life and ultimately, to some degree, saved my family. Because when I got to the point in my career when I was like, it's time for me to go, it was when I realized that I had gotten to a point where my heart was hardening toward people. And that's not the reason I got into it in the first place. So when I started to notice that, I knew it was time to go.
Yeah, there's a lot in that story, man. I mean, I'm still it's actually kind of scary to think that you had an FTO early on in your early on in. Oh man,
And we're back.
I think I might have logged out there. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good, man.
Like I said, I'm out here in the sticks. So getting used to, I also noticed in this spot, there's like good spots, and maybe this isn't one of them.
It's all good.
Yeah. So
whatever we need to do, we can do it again.
No, we're good, man. I like it. I like to keep things free flowing, and I don't really want to do a ton of editing or anything like that, but I'll look at it and go back, whatever.
No, it's all good.
But yeah, that's kind of, I was saying that's kind of scary. I'm trying to put myself in your position as an 18-year-old, not 18-year-old, but like a young.
Ahead. You're breaking up again, so
shit. All right. Well, let's see what we got here. How about now? Is that better? Yeah, I guess we're gonna have to do a ton of editing. Okay, seems like
nah, not a ton. You just
I'm messing around. But is that better? Seems to be like a delay. Am I still frozen?
I can hear you now. Yeah, you're good now.
Hear me now. All right. Let's cross our fingers that this continues on a good note. If, I'm gonna move spots because I know it can be a little bit better on the other side of the crib.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for whatever yeah, for whatever reason. I don't know. Yeah, whatever. I'll figure it out.
It's all good. It's all good.
But well, yeah, what I was saying was that's got to be really scary. I really went back to you sitting in a car as a new police officer. Like any job, like any job, you're looking for guidance and you're looking for support.
Yep.
But this is a different one, right? Where you really your safety um, is at risk all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have to play this game, kind of jump hoops and be very mindful about the relationships you develop. And it's clear early on that someone that they don't want you.
Yeah, yeah. That was the thing that I had to reckon with.
Yeah,
And after I got through it,
yeah,
I went back to some of those black officers, the older ones, and they were just like, "Yeah, man. I mean, you come out of the academy valedictorian. It's like you're the kind of person that would be, you know, the chief one day, and they don't want you in that position.
yeah,
they they
yeah,
want one of their people in that position, whoever they are,
yeah, yeah,
but somebody who is in alignment with what the cultural norms are or what they think."
yeah,
So it was real challenging, man. Yeah, like I said, it's one of the hardest things I had to deal with ever. And the courage that I had to actually exhibit, yeah, it's defining for me. I never anticipated actually having to have that much courage. And I mean, that went throughout my whole career, really, where just I remember when I first got promoted to detective and I literally knew that I was going to this particular unit because the process happens in a certain way where you're not really directly involved with it, you get assigned. And
okay,
so I knew I was going to this particular unit and I was actually in touch with somebody who was a suspect of something because we were doing some sorry about that. We were doing some we do off-duty police work.
yeah,
And so I was in touch with a guy who was trying to organize an event and he was looking for off-duty officers. So somebody put him in contact with me for some reason.
hmm,
Simultaneously, I find out that he's a suspect in a robbery that's related to something else, right? And so I call the unit to be like, yo, I'm been in touch with this dude. Is there anything that you want me to do about the case?
yeah,
And literally, I mean, I'm the only black dude in the unit besides the sergeant that's actually calling me in there.
yeah,
And I start getting like they basically accuse me of trying to get information to pass to him. I don't know this dude. And so even before I get in the unit, remembering this stuff is funny anyway. Remembering this stuff is funny because yeah, they thought I was trying to get information to funnel to him rather than trying to help my unit get whatever they needed for the case. Like it's just bizarre, man. The mentality
this sounds like
and
TV. Like this sounds like a drama, like a TV show that you can't. The shit we normally would be like, oh, you can't. Yeah, dude, this is like you can't make this shit up. You know what I mean? Like this is.
yeah, I mean that's what it was like. It was like they were suspicious of me, and it could have only been because I was black and I was in touch with another black dude who was said to be a suspect of this robbery, which it didn't end up even being that much of a thing. I think he got into a fight with some dudes that he thought owed him money and he took something afterwards. He's promoting some event. I don't remember all the details, but the point was me calling the unit before I was already assigned there. So I just hadn't made it there yet. And so I was like, yo, I'm coming down to be in the unit. I've been in touch with this guy. Is there anything that I can do to help you move this along?
Yeah,
and they thought I was working with him to try to get information from them in order to be able to. I don't even know what they were thinking. It was dumb shit, but
Dude,
this is the kind.
no,
This is the kind of thing that, and I won't say in general, but me as a black man, and I didn't attribute it to being black at the time because I was just still just trying to be open to whatever. I
yeah.
didn't want to put that stamp on it, but the more and more, the longer I was in that career, the more I was like, yeah, this shit is for real. That the way that people are conditioned to think about what it means to be black and what ideas are attached to blackness,
Mhm.
and then how those things work with or without, a law enforcement community, or the goodness of, I don't know, it's all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of societal, sociological, psychological things going on there, where I got to observe that for about a decade and be like, wow, this is for real. So by the time I left, I was like, wow, yeah,
Do
it's just because I was black and from the hood.
you think if you'd have stayed, because some of what I'm listening to is it like the dots are connecting, and when you say like, oh, you're the valedictorian, and then you bring in the politics of policing, and did you ever think like if you'd have kept going, like there could have been more severe situations, like that your life would have been in danger? I don't want to take like I'm not
Yeah,
trying to like go too far, but
yeah,
the way I'm listening to this, for you to have that type of interaction early, I mean, early is like an understatement,
mm-hmm,
your
mm-hmm.
career, and then not too long after there being opportunities, and you're saying it wasn't even that big of a deal, but it was that easy. Like I see how easy it is for someone maybe who like a police officer who doesn't have, who's not as smart or intelligent or just maybe confident in themselves,
Mm-hmm.
to just say like, yeah, no man, like that's not how this is working out. Like I could see where someone else could get in serious trouble here.
Yeah, or they just say it's not worth it and they
Not
bounce.
worth it. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's a lot. That's a lot of what happened. That's the washout process, where it's like they just put so much pressure on you that you just are like, man, I'm done with this shit.
yeah,
Like, it's not worth the stress and strain. And this is all internal. This ain't got nothing to do with like fighting crime or some shit like that. This is all internal, and that is the most important piece I think that people don't pay attention to, is that the pressure that you feel as a human being, one, but then a black one at that,
hmm,
in this environment. And yeah, I didn't really think about it being a danger,
okay.
and mostly because I think these were subconscious things that people weren't consciously doing them,
Okay.
but they associated it with this thing,
Yeah.
like blackness, or the fact that like they couldn't understand why, like, partway through my career I moved back to the neighborhood that I grew up in, because I was like, look, these are the most vigorous years of my life. I mean, I need to move into the place that the people need it the most. And I just, but I was the cop in the neighborhood. Like, and people couldn't believe it. And my colleagues thought I was crazy because they were like, the zip code that I was in was one of the most, uh, had the highest homicide rate in the city
Mm,
at the time. And so they couldn't understand why I would do that. So there are these sort of conflicting ideas,
yeah.
like, where even my brother, my family at the beginning was like, you want to be that? You want to go in there? Like, so this is the thing, like the shock when a black person becomes a police officer. Like, you gonna roll with the enemy or whatever. Like, these ideas about who is what, you know what I'm saying? And it's all just stirred up into what we have as a story of being American, being, black, being white, being, uh, all of those things are bottled up in there.
Yeah.
And so people with ideas that seem conflicting, they can't understand the shit.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it was a conscious thing where they were like, I'm gonna get this nigga out of here, or like nothing like that. It was like, what is he doing? Like, why is he here?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean you're people? Like, I don't get,
Yeah.
like, you did, aren't we your people? Like, this is, it's
Right.
the thin blue line. It's like, if you ain't with us, you're against us, basically. That type of thing. To where if you have any kind of ideas that are outside of the realm of what that thing is, you can have the potential to be ostracized. The crazy thing is that everybody, when they come in there, is a human being. Um, and I would say that of the majority of the people that I met, the vast majority of them, 85+% came in with the great intention of wanting to do good for society.
Absolutely.
They get flipped within a couple of years, though, of just surviving.
Yep.
One of the things in the academy was that, they taught you, your number one job is to go home at the end of the night. And so they say shit like, and nobody really promoted this, but some people would say it under their breath, where it's like, it's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6, shit like that.
Mm.
Where if you're in a situation where your life is supposedly threatened, it'd
Yeah.
be better for you to be in court getting judged rather than getting carried in a casket.
Yeah.
Like that shit blew my mind, because
Yeah.
I was like, what are you even talking about? Because the oath that you take is much different than that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And so when they would say stuff like, it's your job to go home at the end of the night. Granted, yeah, I don't want to die unnecessarily. I don't want to put myself in a situation that causes more problems for people. I don't want to become a part of the problem in a situation. So I'm not trying to be careless. But if I just wanted to preserve my own life, I definitely wouldn't be doing this job.
Yeah. Right. And
Like, so it just never made any sense to me.
mm,
Um, and so I don't think people are consciously like, but dealing with the amount of trauma that you deal with in that,
oh, yeah.
because, and this is what I think about trauma. I think the trauma is literally just an idea of something that is threatening to you.
Mm.
And that causes your system to suffer shock in a way, because you can have something occur and it could be benign in its actual experience, but your interpretation of it could be like, that shit would have killed me.
Yeah.
And so you're traumatized, as we call it, to that kind of event or experience over and over and over again. Well, if all you're dealing with is people's problems every day, and the only thing that you are, or at least the majority of what you're dealing with, is people at their worst times, on their worst days, in the worst situations, your brain can't help but interpret the world as being that.
Yeah.
And so the trauma that you experience, especially as a police officer, causes you to see in a way that terrible shit can happen whenever you get put in a situation that feels like it's going to be threatening to you.
Sure.
And so if somebody saw something that I did as a threat to their well-being, then yeah, they could have come to violence. But I never considered that as something that, if I had stayed in that career and I continued to progress and whatever, um, yeah, it wasn't that intentional or, actively malicious. It was like, it's underneath the surface. It's shit people ain't even aware of,
Yeah.
and they're doing it.
Hmm.
Um, and that's even more dangerous in my opinion.
Yeah. What did you ever, did you ever struggle with, did you ever struggle with any like, I don't know, any harmful practices in terms of dealing with that trauma? You know what I mean? Like one of the things I recognize, like I'm not trying to go too far down. Actually, I am trying to go too far
Yeah,
down.
let's go.
Yeah. But one of the things that can come from that is finding an outlet,
Mhm.
and a lot of the times it can come in the form of like drinking or substance
Yep,
abuse,
yep, yep.
um, sex. Uh,
Mhm.
there's outlets out in there, and none of the things that I mentioned are harmful, right? It's when they can become harmful,
Yeah,
right? So did you ever fall into any of that? Like, was that something that you struggled with, or something like you had a pretty supportive?
yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't struggle with that directly.
Okay.
Police departments are notorious for having, high divorce rates.
Mhm.
That's because everybody's sleeping with everybody else, or there's alcohol and substance abuse of different kinds, where you see that shit, like it's acceptable to be drinking all the time or whatever when you're off.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think those are the consequences of suppressing those experiences and not allowing yourself to breathe, not allowing yourself to be fully human.
Mhm.
So you cope. For me personally, this goes a little bit deeper because, um, my wife at the time was always dealing with some form of depression. Um, and so, you know, she grew up with some alcoholism modeled to her.
Yeah.
And so whenever she was under stress, like that's where it went.
Yeah.
And I found myself drinking to cope with her drinking to cope with her situation.
Okay.
So instead of just sitting back and being angry or hurt or afraid about it, I would just drink with her. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, definitely was a fact, but I didn't connect it to the stress from the job.
Yeah.
It was like at home, I got to deal with all this stuff too, and I got to I'm just gonna join her because
Yeah.
it's easier. And uh, yeah, I don't know if that was a mistake or not, but in the rest of the story, um, yeah, maybe we can get into that at some point. I don't know if I really prepped you for that or hipped you to that piece of my story that, my wife at the time was, yeah, we known each other since we were teenagers.
Okay.
And I guess the brunt of it is that she actually died by suicide.
Okay.
It's been a little over 3.5 years ago now.
Mm.
And that was obviously devastating.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think more of what my coping mechanisms were was really just trying to take care of her
Yeah.
and and feel okay some of the time. So I never got into drugs or drinking crazy or anything like that. But when I was at home and my wife was in the throes of um, her own experience of coping,
Mhm.
then it's funny. Yeah, I noticed that I was coping with her coping by doing the same thing she was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no is the answer to your question, and but then also that is a yes.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up something really insightful, and in that it doesn't stop at the job, right? You have obligations at home, whether that's with a significant other, to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
family members.
Yep.
Um, life keeps going, and yeah, that the more I heard you talk about, your complications at the job, my assumption is that like nurture and that care came out. That care came out.
Mm.
Like, like you said before, what the fuck? What do you mean? Like, dude, do you want to end up dead or don't you?
Mm.
I think people probably pick that up in you, whether you recognize it or not. I'm sure that came out because I was gonna say earlier when I find it, I find it really, hmm, I find it really important that you identified your grandfather as a nurturer and as
Mm.
modeled care. Uh,
Mm.
it's important to me, and I would assume it's important to you in the work that we do,
Yeah.
typically with men, and
Yeah.
that there's this idea that there haven't been any caring men. That's not a mainstream conversation. Like, right now we're in an interesting place where we're talking about men, and I think the common story when it comes to older men is that they're raw, rigid, which is
Mm.
completely false, right? There's truth in that
Yeah. This.
every time. But I also think there's a lot of very sweet, like loving older men,
Yep.
and they didn't. I bet they're sitting back like, who the hell are these people talking about? Like, that's not me. And I think it's important that we have those discussions, and it's important that you talk about, as we kind of like, I guess this is where we can start kind of transitioning into our conversations around our work and our work um, with men of color,
Mm-hmm.
and exploring our identity, exploring masculinity,
Mm-hmm.
and being nurturing, and
Yeah.
exploring, loving and like one another.
Mm-hmm.
Um, oh yeah, that's what I meant to say. So you, dude, you might have the dopest name. Like when you were telling me the story, how you got your name, I was like, dude, when it like set in maybe like earlier this morning when I was trying to think about like how the podcast was gonna go. I was like, dude, this is the fucking coolest name. I didn't even break it down. I was like, yo, Don Carter, like there part of it is reminds me of like a mob boss, like Don Carter. And I'm like, damn, what
Yeah.
shit. Like for a second, I was like, dude, is that his real name? Did he make that shit up? Like um, but yeah, that is I mean, that is one of like the coolest names. And if you wanted to like play the you know, people say like, "Oh, you were gonna be something because like we knew
Yeah.
you were gonna be something." Like, dude, you have the name where it's like, dude, you were gonna do something, man. You were gonna do. Um, so yeah, I'm like I said before, it's important that I get to hear this and that other people get to hear how impactful your grandfather was, and maybe that being, you know, uh, actually not but a great piece to how you
I mean, it's really significant, and I don't know if I give it enough significance in my own conscious thought process. But when you asked me about it, it was like, oh yeah, because honestly, I've had men in my life to some degree,
yeah.
you know, that have stepped in and done this thing or that thing.
Mm,
But the first man that I really connected with was my grandfather,
yeah.
and learning about his story, especially after he passed away, just respected him even more. But by the time I was born, he's in the last third of his life. And, I got 20 something years, but he was still just pretty chill, quiet, didn't say much. Um, but he was always present with you.
Mm,
Like my love for coffee comes from mornings when I lived with my mom, growing up, we lived with my grandparents for some times. Um, and I would get up early in the morning when he was up. I'd come downstairs, see him in his chair, smell the Folgers coffee, and I come and sit with him. I come sit on the couch or the divan or whatever you want to call it next to the. So he had his chair in the corner, then he had the couch right next to it and his little side table in between it. He had his cup of coffee. He was probably smoking cigarettes at the time too, reading the newspaper or doing the crossword puzzle or something. But every morning I would spend that time with him. And I was little, I was tiny, and would just come up there. And yeah, he had a profound impact on the way I really saw manhood.
mm,
It wasn't like he wasn't, macho. He wasn't like super in stuff. He was highly respected
mhm,
and he hardly said anything, it felt like.
mm,
And the things that he said were just significant.
yeah.
But I remember spending that time with him, and literally me drinking coffee started with him. I think I was 7 or 8 years old, and I was like, let me get some of that. You know what I'm saying? Because I see him with his coffee every morning, so I modeled myself after him. And he
Yeah.
used to be like, "Coffee will make you black." And I was like, "Okay, whatever that means." But I remember tasting the coffee and thinking it tasted like shit,
Oh,
but still was like, "Nope, I'm gonna drink this because I'm like Buddy. We call him Buddy."
okay.
And so everybody called him Buddy, which, that's a friend. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Um, but yeah, that model for manhood.
Mhm,
And then even after he passed away, like I remember the stuff that my grandmother would say and learning about their story afterwards. Like it just had such a deep impact on me because she was like, you know, it wasn't perfect, but that man never put his hands on me, and that man never did this, and like she was like marveling at the what he created in her life.
yeah.
And then I learned that this was her second husband. I didn't know that. I didn't know that he was like she was widowed really early at an early age. I think she got married at like 18 or something like that, and her husband died. And then my grandfather came in and swooped her up
Yeah.
and built this community around himself.
Yeah.
Like he connected with his neighbor, and they became best friends, and their two families, like we literally still call each other family, even though there's no blood relation. Like
Yeah.
they're my aunts, and you know, that's how much they bonded. So the bond of love that he created, that they created together in a neighborhood, especially, yeah, that's foundational for how I see myself. And I never really even thought about it to this degree, but yeah, it's foundational in how I see myself and how I see myself as a man, what I model to my own children,
Yeah.
um, the willingness to just be loving
Mhm.
and tender and gentle. Like my grandfather said one thing to me one time that shattered my world. And I don't remember all the stuff that was going on, but he just looked at me and was like, "Stop acting silly." It was just one time. I had to be like 3 years old. And I remember like just busting out crying, just bawling all over the floor
Yeah.
because I just didn't. That was the harshest thing he ever said to me.
Wow.
Stop acting silly. And it wasn't even that harsh, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was it.
Yeah.
The rest of my whole life, it was just like getting to sit with him, sit on his lap, talk to him, hang out, go fishing, ride around with him when he was running errands, just be in his presence.
Mm.
And I used to diminish the impact that that had on me, or I used to diminish the presence of a solid man in my life because my dad I didn't meet till I was 16.
Right.
But reflecting on it now, it's like shit, like this goes way deeper
Mm.
into like the fabric of who I am and who I see myself as and how I have myself in a community. I
Yeah.
talk way more than my grandfather did that I know of,
Yeah.
but the way that he connected with people and the way that people like leaned on him and just depended on him just for just for friendship. It wasn't even like anything in particular.
Yeah.
His willingness to share, like we'd be in my grandmother in my grandparents' room, which is where we gathered, either watching TV or just I'd be laying on their floor, whatever. You know what I'm saying? And I remember neighbors coming over with their little cups, and he had his little handle of scotch underneath the bed.
Yep.
And they come in with a little ice cup. He give them a little shot or something. Just stuff like that, where every little aspect of his life he was sharing, giving, open, loving. My mom adored him.
Mhm.
Everybody adored him, like even his my uncles. So yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of model of manhood, that kind of model of masculinity is the principal thing that I had. And so anything that's outside of that just seems like just foreign.
So I hear vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
just share, like when you share,
Mm.
you're like it's transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that takes a level of vulnerability that everyone doesn't really want to. It doesn't want to practice, right?
Yeah, he was at ease, man.
Mm.
He was at ease.
Mm.
Like that's how I describe it. He was at ease. That stuff was just cool, and it wasn't dismissive of things. It wasn't like
Yeah.
diminishing of hardship. He was just at ease.
Mm.
That kind of peacefulness, that's the word, is peacefulness that he displayed to me, which is really the main thing that I maintain now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What parts, if if you can reflect on his personality and your relationship with him, what about him has transferred into you developing your business, you developing relationships with other men of color and
Mm.
supporting them in their journey?
Yeah, that's so interesting, man. I literally just came upon this photo of the two men that I'm named after,
Yeah.
like in the last couple of weeks. And it was really understanding that that relationship is one that defined and redefined him
Mm.
as a man,
Mm.
where he was best friends with this man that he lived next door with. And he actually passed away really early, but his death is what I guess transformed my grandfather's life. into what it was.
Mm.
Like they were homies. And then when he died, he just changed his ways to what I don't know what he was like before, but the version of him that I got,
Was
it
the
just transformed him to have his best friend pass away at an early age. And I don't know how old he was. He might have been in his 40s or 50s or something like that. I'm not sure. I can't. I'd have to go back and ask folks, but I know that they cite that as the time that my grandfather shifted a bunch of stuff. And then he started going to church all the time. Then he was just, really connected to family and folks. And again, this is nothing I ever considered, but what he modeled in terms of his willingness to connect and be open and gentle and sweet and good, especially with children,
Mhm.
um, and everybody really that knew him.
Yeah.
And then having this relationship with another man that actually defined and shifted his whole way of being. Like that's the kind of impact that this dude had on my grandfather. So their friendship and the power of their friendship is really what moved him into this way of being. Like that idea of black men connecting in a vulnerable way, I've seen it in the work that I do. It's transformative.
Mm.
It's more than powerful. It's like just being in each other's space and being seen by each other.
Yeah.
Not posturing and all that other shit. Not you know, but just being together. Like just that in and of itself transforms this sort of idea of masculinity and manhood.
Yeah.
I facilitate a monthly online wellness gathering with black men in corporate America, and just the time that we spend together for that hour a month, it's just being together and being seen and being willing to be seen that I've watched over the course of a year and a half or so just transform people's lives for the better.
Yeah.
And so this willingness to connect, this willingness to be vulnerable and open, and really the willingness to be seen
Mm.
is, yeah, it's powerful and transforming for the good. I have a friend that um, another black man, and this was last year during the pandemic. He was doing an event, and this is when I was living out in the Bay Area. He was
Mm.
doing an event out here in Kansas City, and he I was just like, yo, I want to support this. It was called Pray on Truce. Truce is the racial dividing line in Kansas City. So
Okay.
east of Truce, you see all the disparities that are, typical of this. And that stuff got modeled here,
Yeah.
and spread across the country in a way. Like that's the history.
Yeah.
So he just wanted to organize where he prayed. He had people gather with no particular background and just show up and pray on truce. And so they stretched the whole 10 and a half miles that it goes, the whole city, right?
Ah.
Uh, that this historically racially dividing line.
Yeah.
And anyway, I came to support him. I just got on a plane and came. And we were sitting at a coffee shop. And this is during the pandemic, so there's not a lot of, stuff going on. But we were outside, and he had another friend there, a white guy, but he starts sharing something about something. I don't remember what it was, and he starts tearing up a little bit. And so
Mm.
I just reached over and grabbed his hand and just held his hand while he was finishing sharing this shit.
Yeah.
And we got up from that, and he was like, that's the first time I ever think I've held a black man's hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh shit,
Hmm.
probably right. I was like, I didn't even think about that. And
Yeah.
how just being present with each other in that moment and being willing to just connect in that, whatever he was feeling.
Yeah.
I mean, it changed my life after he said that, after he realized it, because then it awakened this deeper desire for like that kind of connection. It's
Yeah.
like, damn, I don't connect with black men this way. I don't connect with any men this way, really, but especially not black men.
Yeah.
And so just being willing to be connected like that
Yeah.
has the power to transform for good. And so with the work that we do of facilitating this kind of openness and authenticity and vulnerability for Black men, um, I mean, I think it's the work right now, because we all have these same views of each other because they've been conditioned. And
No.
so, me as a Black man in a police department, and not knowing me, but immediately imputing all this identity on me based on whatever you think a Black man is,
Yeah.
that caused all the shit to go on for me in my career that was hard or seemingly negative. I mean,
Yeah.
it helped me grow some resilience, but it was painful. Um, those kind of ideas of us are steeped in our own minds, to where we distrust ourselves and we distrust each other. And so the more practice or opportunity that we can get to connect. And so my grandfather, with this relationship with this man that defined and redefined his life in some ways, and that really literally marks mine, named mine.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't realize how much of an impact that had, but it's foundational.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful that they had that. There's a friendship there.
Yeah. Yeah. I gotta, I wish, hold up real quick. I'm gonna see if I can do this, because I want to show you this picture. If you can see it, I'm gonna see if I can put it in there.
Yeah.
Little unorthodox, I know.
Oh, that's fine, man. That's what it's all about.
So you can see this thing. I think it's in my, because I just recently shared it. But yeah, we can keep talking while I look for it real quick. It
Yeah.
should be
No, I
quick.
just I've seen that before. I had a college roommate whose best friend was murdered during college, and it was so transformational for him. I mean,
Mm,
obviously, I don't think it. I don't think it was easy by any means, and it wasn't just overnight. But to see what happened with him, and not to say that was just it, right?
yeah,
I think when we lose people. When we lose people in our lives, when we lose something that we really care about, yeah, we take the time to think about what we're doing, where we're at, where we're going, where we've been.
there's definitely the opportunity for it. And if we can be in a position where we are trusting enough, then that kind of experience can be positive.
Yeah,
It provides an opportunity, a moment where we get the chance to. I just think it's be more human, man.
yeah,
Like,
no,
just
absolutely.
just be. Um, so I'm about to transfer this to my computer so I can share it with you real quick. Share my screen.
Yeah. Let me make sure you have access here. Oh, yeah, super interesting how that works. Um, exploring male relationships was something that was part of my own transformation
Hmm.
as an adult.
So let's see if it lets me do this.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, dope.
Yeah. So that's them. My grandfather's on the left, and then that's Earl Eugene on the right,
Yeah.
and my mom named me after them.
Wow.
But even just like, I just saw this photo for the first time. It's been a couple weeks now.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and this is January of '68.
Yeah, I was trying to read that, but yeah, I can't.
Uh-huh. But these are the two men that I'm named after.
Do you have this like in a frame or anything like that?
Nah, it's literally just digital. I saw one of the ladies so one of his daughters,
Yeah.
who I call one of my great aunts, or one of my aunts, because his daughters were like my mom's sisters.
Yeah.
Like, they literally all just became family, next door neighbors. And this is in the house. This is either my grandparents' house or the house next door. This looks like my grandparents' house, even though they were almost identical.
Yeah.
Um, but just seeing this and seeing their connection, seeing their, like, they dressing alike,
Yeah.
they smiling, like, just together. I didn't realize the depth of their friendship except through the stories that I heard after, they were both passed away. But this right here set up all of the connection that their two families have, that continues to echo, throughout time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad that you showed that to me. I think it's stuff like that. It's stuff like that that like makes you think. Like I'll think I know I'm gonna think about that at some point. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And again, another story that's not necessarily told, right? The friendship. And I think that I was telling you about my own exploration of male relationships. And this
Mm-hmm.
was in my 30s. And I went into therapy because I got this feeling. A friend of mine was like, I'm huge on authenticity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I'm I don't think you can be authentic. You are authentic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I know that's something about me. Like I just want people to know, not not in a bad way. What you see is what you get, but you can trust. But you can trust me. Um, I'm not aggressive. I'm not like hostile. I'm me. I'm accepting. You know what I mean? Like it's not going to be hard
Yeah.
to interact with me.
Yeah.
And I want people, because I have had this experience throughout my life and it's increasing as the days go on, of feeling more human and feeling more free. I always
Mm-hmm.
want that for other people, right? We probably share that
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I remember getting to this point with a friend of mine where he started dating a woman. He started dating a woman, and I started to notice him change, not in an extremely like dangerous way, but I was like, huh, like I feel like you're losing part of yourself.
Hmm.
I feel like you're losing part of yourself. And that's also a reality in a
Mm-hmm. Yep.
so I understood that part. But there was something else. Like there was something else that was there. And I went to therapy and I was exploring this. And one of the first things um one of the first things that came up, one of the questions like that came up for me, because I was getting I was getting angry, like I was getting upset. I was like, "Dude, why are you upset?" Like, I was asking myself, like, "Why are you getting upset with this? Why are you so upset with your boy?" Like, and it's moving past the relationship and
Yeah.
something else. Why are you so upset about this? And I started to question. I was like, "What? Like, what is this? What is this? What is this?"
Hmm.
I had to come to a fact. Like, I was like, "Oh, like I love this person. Like, I love
Hmm.
this guy, and I really don't want to see him alter himself and just let and lose him." That's
Hmm.
essentially what I got down to. I was like,
Yeah.
"I don't
Yeah.
want to lose this guy,"
Yeah.
right? And so I started like I remember going into therapy, and I'm like, "Dude, is this like is this like homosexual behavior? Am I saying that I
Mhm.
love him like in
Yeah.
a romantic way? I don't think so. Like
Yeah.
I don't feel romantically attracted to him, but I am attracted to him. Like I do love this guy." And
Yeah.
I remember my therapist saying at the time, he's like, You're talking about male love. You're talking about a friendship. You're talking about loving someone, and you
Man.
want that." And I was like, "Oh fuck!" You, just I was like, "Oh shit!" And the more I started exploring that, the more free I became. The more I was like, "Oh, damn!" Talking about programmed,
Yep.
just hardwired. Like,
Mm.
immediately, it had to be
Yep.
immediately, I loved another man.
Yeah.
Immediately, I
Yeah.
was like, "Wait, am I gay? Is this
Yep. Yep.
does that mean" it's like, no. It's
Yep.
not what it is. It's just you feel that deeply about
Yeah.
your friend.
Yeah. Feeling that deeply and that vulnerable about another human being, and then it being a male friend is like I had a moment with my best friend recently where, he's in California.
Yeah,
We actually met here in the Midwest when, after he got married, he moved here with his wife, and I met him through her because I was friends with her first, but we just hit it off quick
yeah,
and then just bonded deeply. And then he actually moved back out there because he wanted to be closer to some of his family.
yeah,
Uh, and then when I moved out there, we reconnected. But then when I moved back here, um, I was just like, damn, I miss him, like for
yeah, yeah,
real. And I'm going through some vulnerable stuff. Obviously, myself, recently engaged, and my daughter is doing her thing, trying to figure out her own life in her own way, apart from me.
mhm,
Hard stuff. And so, talking to him one day, he just showed up for me in a different way than he had before, like even more vulnerable. Cause we always just shoot the shit, or just he always talking trash, or just some of the typical stuff where we've been through some hard stuff together. Him with some troubles in his marriage, and then some short separation, and me losing my wife, which
mhm,
he loved. You know what I'm saying? And and then now I'm here, wrestling with the hardest thing that I've had to deal with since my wife passed away, which is my daughter now leaving my household
yeah,
without, like, sooner than I expected. And I don't even remember what he said. I just remember the feeling on the phone talking to him, just this deep tenderness and like gratefulness. And he wasn't even really saying much, but I get off the phone with him and I was just like, man, I love him.
yeah,
Like, and I miss him.
yeah,
And I wish we could just be in the same space, man.
yeah,
But just to have that feeling to that degree, and we've been friends for probably, I think it's coming up on 10 years now, more than that, maybe. I think
yeah,
his oldest daughter is, yeah, she gotta be close to that. Um, but there's just depths to it, there's levels to it. And so now having the intention and practice of like really embracing specifically other black men in
yeah,
this way, because one is healing for me,
yeah,
and what it builds in bonds. Yeah, another one of my great longest friends just lost his mom, and he's just kind of like hardcore hood nigga type stuff, like where he just does his thing. And just to be real, I'm intentionally really tender and like soft spoken with him about this stuff, because I was like, man, you know, I just don't push it aside.
yeah,
I made a practice of it, and I've watched the fruit of that kind of openness and vulnerability, where I tell brothers that I love them,
yeah,
tell them I'm proud of them, tell them I'm feeling a certain way about whatever they're displaying, and not like in some higher than you way. Like when I say I'm proud of you, it's like I'm not proud like a father. I'm proud like I get to be associated with you.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
feel good about the stuff that you do. Man, I'm proud of you, man. Like I get to be connected to you. Not like, oh, I'm proud of you. You're doing good. Like not that thing. You know what I'm saying? And so it's powerful, bro. Like, and to have walked in this kind of lifestyle and mindset for many years now on my own, but now to be more intentionally trying to connect with other black men in that same way,
mhm,
it's deeply healing for me.
mhm,
And I find myself even longing for, older men, in particular older black men, as confidants. I could say mentor, but I'm not really looking for mentorship. I'm just looking for the covering. You know what I'm saying? So like I'm reaching out to black men who are older than me,
yeah,
just to connect, just to listen, just to.
mm,
And I never really realized that was something I was missing until the last few years,
yeah,
where whatever the reasons, opportunities come up to address some of the more internal aspects of what it means to be a black male human. You know what I'm saying? Um, so yeah, I'm really just thinking through it as we speak, but feeling that. And I used to have that same kind of thing. I used to think like, am I gay because I'm like more sensitive and tender? Or like I wrestle with this all throughout my childhood into adulthood. Like even just with seeing other men as attractive or like being able to notice it and be like, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
That mean I'm gay? Like what? Like the because that's the only association we have with male love, right?
So,
And it's like we're missing so much of the full spectrum of the kind of connections and sense of humanity that we can display and embody when we have had it relegated to just this. Oh, if you feel tender toward another man, you must want to have that kind of relationship. Nah, like I really have a deep love and need that same kind of thing or have the reciprocated felt wanting. I'll just say want. I
yep.
want that kind of love.
Mhm.
Um, that there's something really healing about it, and it comes because we've held this idea of ourselves that was too small.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, man. So you stop being a detective. You walk away.
yeah,
You go through your own exploratory journey, and you pick up, sure you pick up nuggets here and there of wisdom.
mm-hmm.
And how did you decide that you wanted to start working with men in corporate America, black men in corporate America,
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, coaching, right?
Yeah, yep. Um, it was just through another discovery. It's like after my wife passed away, um, it was right when we were moving to California. So I didn't plan on being a single father in California.
Yeah.
And the job that I had at the time, I had committed to staying with them for a year because they moved me from here to there,
Okay.
you know, and they were opening up a brand new location out there. So I was going to be at the helm of that in part. And then this sudden loss. And I just in the process realized that I needed to be more available to my kids
Yeah.
because I was just gone a lot.
Yeah.
I was, having to send them food, Uber Eats or, you know, whatever the grocery delivery service was. And everybody is going through this healing need for healing. And so I was like, I just need to be more available to them. So
Yeah.
um, when I decided to leave after a year, one of the girls that worked for me was like, you should do coaching.
Mm.
And I thought it was kind of silly because I could only think of life coaching and thought that sounded cheesy and all of that stuff. I just didn't know anything about what it really was. But I knew why she said it because of how I led them or how I facilitated stuff for them and their learning and growth. So I was like, okay. Um, and then I hired my first business and mindset coach and started to learn how to put the things together that I had as my assets to use for other people. And I initially was focused on, spouses and partners of suicide victims to really help them through their healing journey. Like I had experienced this dynamic healing experience,
Yeah.
um, and the things that I learned from that. But that was really heavy. And so I found myself just doing some networking, and I ended up at this place where this black female therapist was getting all of these, great growth for her clients. And then they would come to her and be like, we can't take this stuff to our men.
Yeah.
And so she decided to facilitate this gathering that she called Restoring the King or something like that. So we were up in Oakland at this little Jamaican spot, and we just gathered, and there were these men on the panels, therapists, former, you know, football players, businessmen, all kind of stuff. And when I found myself around those guys and talking about the stuff that we did, um, in that conversation, I realized the power of that engagement.
Yep.
And then one of the guys came to me afterwards from the panel and was like, "Yo, we need to work together because
Mm.
of some things that I said." And I was like, "Okay, well, what is it? I don't know what that entails for you because I thought he meant for his clients, as a therapist, but it was really like he wanted to work with me to, facilitate what I was talking about in his own life."
Sure.
And so that's how I started. And I started seeing that those were the kind of people who were just drawn to me. It was black men in some sort of business executive position or entrepreneurs or something like that. And so I was like, well, this is just the thing. And then I recognized that people who are in those places of prominence in their fields or have a level of success,
Yeah.
that to whatever degree they've just kind of muscled through whatever obstacles they've encountered and resiliently persisted in something
Yeah.
to get the success that they have. But now they want to go to an even higher level. They want to have a deeper expression of authenticity. They want to do work that's more meaningful.
Mhm.
And they just kind of spaced out about it. And I started to discover that high performing Black executives and entrepreneurs neglect those things that are really central to who they are
Mhm.
in pursuit of those ventures. And then they get to a point of having a success, but still feeling unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this makes sense. And so I just applied the stuff that I learned in my own healing journey and developed a process that, or actually extrapolated from my experience what that process was.
Yeah.
And I started teaching it and facilitating it and coaching it. And naturally, as a Black man who's talking about vulnerability, trauma, healing, all of that shit,
Yeah.
like there's a certain kind of attention that I get because nobody really is talking about that in the way that I do.
Yeah.
And so, or not nobody, but very few people in comparison
Yeah.
to
I
the
got you.
other stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so I just think it's part of the what the work is right now for us to really reckon with those things. And so um, I just accept the call, and I'm still working to accept the call of like, this is the work right now. Like, let's do the work.
Mhm.
Because initially, especially when I started focusing exclusively on Black executives and entrepreneurs, there was some reluctance, um, and I think that was just to do with my own, uh, just having to work out all of the stuff that I have of the story of still what Black people are and dealing with being Black and what that means and all of that. So it's given me the opportunity to unravel some more of this stuff in myself
Yeah.
about the seeming limitations of what it means to be Black.
Mhm.
And so that's how I got into the work, and that's why I step into it even more powerfully now, because I see it as one of the most important things to what I see coming or what I see happening, which is what I call the resurgence of the prominence of melanated people on the planet,
Mhm.
where the story of Black being a negative thing,
Mhm.
pendulum is swinging back due to colonialism, due to European elitism, whatever it is that we've gotten over the last half millennia or so
Yeah.
about who we are and with respect to the world.
Yeah.
um, it's not true, one, and so the story just has to naturally break down. And so I'm just playing my part to contribute to what I see as some of the most important work to do right now. Our country and these systems have been built on the backs of Black people, uh, even Black men in a certain way, the vilification of Black men. And so there are all these stories that we have about ourselves that don't allow us to readily just jump out into the world and give our best, because we got to protect ourselves first, we feel like.
Mhm.
So if we can let that wall down and see that the world really isn't as dangerous as we've been told it is or that we feel it is, then I think we have the opportunity to really give our best and actually contribute in a way that allows us to create the next version of the world.
This reminds me a lot of the work that I've done with um, black male student athletes,
Mm-hmm.
and we talk about high performers,
Mm-hmm.
and this program or this plan that doesn't include a different type of work. So when you think about basketball, historically, one of the things I was kind of or that's coming to mind is when we heard about Phil Jackson,
Mm-hmm.
or yoga and Buddhism within um, his coaching approach. But I think oftentimes it can be the story as well. I just have to practice and I have to practice and I have to practice and
Yeah.
study and practice and study the game. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And I think that there's something missing there, right? There's a gap and not giving yourself space to explore that identity, right? So one of the first questions I like to ask student athletes is, who are you without the sport?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can be really scary, and that can also come with, it can come with hmm, it can come with pushback from coaches, athletic directors.
Mm-hmm.
They want their player tapped in, and historically mental health and continues to be mental health in athletics with top performing black athletes is performative based.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to I want you to practice mindfulness strictly for this game so you know how to perform in the last 2 minutes or when shit is hitting the fan. What are you? I don't have any issue with that.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's important that we recognize that it's not always about when shit hits the fan on the field,
Right.
and that sports is interesting because you can have some behavioral issues and you can mask those in sports. You can have an eating disorder.
Hmm.
Like, dude, you're jacked. Like, yeah, man. People are complimenting you on
Mm.
something that you don't see as an issue, but
Mm.
an unhealthy practice, and it won't come out until later on in life.
Till it's devastating.
It's devastating. Or
Yeah.
obsessive compulsive. Dude, I'm obsessive compulsive, dude. I practice when I wake up at 5:08, and at 5:09 I'm on the floor hitting push-ups, and then I'm practicing, I'm practicing, I'm practicing. I'm mad about this,
Mm.
and that's great until it's not.
Yeah.
You there's
Yeah.
more.
Why are you mad?
Yeah,
What are you proving?
yeah,
Like all of those things, all of those questions come to mind is like, if it was motivated by something that was actually positive, like like you just want to be your greatest self. Okay, great, great.
yeah,
But if you're on the field with a chip on your shoulder, if you're on the court with a chip on your shoulder, what's that chip for? Like, how are you working from a place? And the reason that makes a difference is because I see anger or any kind of negative motivation as quickly exhaustive.
mm,
The amount of energy that goes into that
mhm,
can't be sustained.
yeah,
Like a bomb goes off, boom, it might have a big impact, but it dissipates pretty quickly compared to being able to siphon energy in an electrical, you know, same amount of energy, use that power to generate all sorts of different things,
mm,
or it could just explode. And that having that kind of thing as motivation is so limiting
yeah,
because you can't sustain that forever. The body's not designed to sustain that forever.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So yeah, it's and what I see, even not even just for athletes, but for black people in general,
yeah,
our addiction to trauma, our addiction to the negative story, our addiction to what we think are our problems,
yeah,
that kind of thing, it's exhausting because you're not designed to sustain that energy for that long.
yeah,
So can you live from a place that is more consistent, where
yeah,
you don't have to be angry to get shit done, where you don't have to be upset to make stuff happen,
yeah.
you know, because that kind of spike and it's just that's why people get burned out. Um,
Uh, I remember a story. There was a linebacker. I forgot who he started off with. His name was Brian Cox. I remember he played for the Jets at one point. He played for the Dolphins, actually. I think he started off with the Dolphins and then maybe finished at the Jets. I think this is right. Actually, I hope. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's him. But I remember an interview, and he said he used to get, pump himself up before like a play. He was a linebacker,
Mm,
and he would imagine that the opposing running back raped his wife and his children.
mhm, mhm,
It would take him to a place, right?
mhm,
He would start crying and
mhm,
go somewhere else. In my mind, again, if that's what you want to do, like, who am I to tell you that this is not your, like, you want to be a football player and that's what it takes and for you to do your job really well? Okay. As someone sitting in a room from across from another person, if they told me that, we have a different conversation.
mhm.
Like, not to say that you not wrong.
Sure.
There,
I, don't-
what
I
else?
don't see it either. I would ask, is it beneficial? And if
Well,
it's beneficial in this circumstance, is it beneficial in, because you're a whole person,
yeah,
right? That doesn't just stay there. If
yeah,
you understand the aspects of your humanity, then you know that what you imagine is what your body feels is real. That's why you start crying when you imagine this shit. So
yes,
it's real to you. So do you want a real experience of something that didn't actually happen in your outward experience?
yeah,
And how is that benefiting something beyond just this play?
yeah. I know my job. Like, this kind of goes back to, this kind of ties back to what we were talking about in the beginning, when feeling so good about moving to remind my job. I
Mm,
think oftentimes one of the stereotypes and maybe one of the stigmas behind mental health are, people seeking out mental health services from a licensed therapist. Because I've been around therapists who try to like break down things, and it's a very intellectually, like,
mhm,
it's an intellectually curious job that can also kind of be pretentious,
mm,
and people sometimes try to like utilize, yeah, people just try to find a reason for everything,
mm.
identify a behavior. Oh, this person has
Oh yeah, yeah.
this person is I'm diagnosing this person with a, and that's not who I am. I'm
Yeah.
like, that doesn't really serve a purpose to me. That doesn't really serve a purpose in the work I do. I
Hmm.
understand part of it. Like, if you're seeing a client who's um, using Medi-Cal, then in order to bill, you need to have proof of like what you're,
Hmm.
what services you're providing and for what reason.
Yeah.
That's problematic in itself, but I understand that's a system that we work within.
Yep.
But one of the things that I've really, really loved about this new job is the group of people that are highly intellectually curious, humble,
Hmm.
vulnerable. And I'm gonna give you an example of the vulnerability. This first, I mean, I didn't know how to express my joy. And it was something to be, it was kind of odd to be joyful about this. Like, I was kind of torn. Our first exercise, we have a new director of counseling at the college that I'm at. And our first exercise, first time we've all sat in a room together,
Hmm.
I want us to talk about our physical and psychological journey to being a counselor at this college. And I was probably sitting like this, leaning a little forward, like hooked in. And then I just hit one of these. Like, man, did you hear what I've been fucking thinking about, like what I've wanted from a job
Wow.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I have been seeking out this depth that you've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And the work that I've done in the past has always been to support other organizations get to that depth.
Hmm.
So when and I mean, to have this happen on the first, then he modeled it, right? And
Hmm.
it was wonderful. It's what you should do, right? When you want somebody to go that deep, in this situation, you read the room correctly. Also happens to be a licensed psychologist, so I'm sure this isn't his first rodeo. You know what I mean?
Right.
Talks about his experiences as um, first generation Mexican American. Parents are undocumented. Was a field laborer until he was 16. Grew up in Idaho. Queer. Remembers the Klan having meetings in the town center.
Hmm.
Talks about his experiences of identity and going to therapy and it being a white guy like who just was like, what I don't similarly, like I can't help you. Similarly to that the FTO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, like I can't help you. So that was his first experience with mental health clinician.
Hmm.
And then it got fucking real in there. But not
Hmm.
real to like, I mean, you had some tears and stuff like that, but it got real. It was honest. It was
Yeah.
authentic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
I've
beautiful.
never been in that before. And that's why I said that joy, like because people shared some shit, me included.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I love like, and the reason I bring this up is because you mentioned like what you want, what you crave um from relationships, specifically
Mhm.
from men, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this I told, like I had a conversation with my director today, um and I had to tell him, I was like, hey man, I know I've told you this like 3 times. I'm not trying to kiss your fucking ass. I swear to you, I'm not trying to kiss your fucking ass. And I hope you know that I hope you know, like you can gauge that I'm not the type of person that's here to kiss your ass. But I am still in awe that like that was our first exercise.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it'd have been different if it was from a female clinician or a female supervisor.
Hmm.
The fact that another man did that, I was like, word, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to share that because I know we talked about kind of transitioning into Vermont, and when you were talking, that made me
Yeah.
it just came up. Um, so yeah, what are your goals? What are some of the goals coming up? We've come out a pretty hectic year.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the goals for groups,
For.
for the wellness groups, for
Mm-hmm.
coaching?
Yeah.
What are you hoping? What are you thinking going to be some of the hurdles?
So I don't know how to anticipate the hurdles.
Okay.
I'm in a what I'll call a market research mode right now,
Okay.
where I'm transitioning into um, developing some offerings or some engagements that are more community focused,
Okay.
because I do one-on-one right now,
Mhm.
and so looking to see how to work with people in community or in groups.
Yeah.
Specifically, um, recently founded what I'm calling the Black Business Breakthrough Network, and it's for Black professionals, executives, entrepreneurs, business owners
Yeah.
who really are finding themselves in a loop of some kind, or want to break out of the just want to break through into a new level of expression in their business in particular.
Mhm.
There's two parts to this because I think that business itself is really a great place for healing.
Mhm.
That when you are serving other people, you get to see your own shit in a way that, you know, if you are courageous enough to reckon with it, can bring the most development or bring significant development. But it also adds to the world. I think what I'm constantly wanting is to help people tap into that depth of who they really are
Mhm.
and allow that to come out and be seen and be and to flourish.
Mhm.
And so the Black Business Breakthrough Network, my goals with it right now that are developing are to be able to facilitate community to where people can break through the limitations that they think they have
Mhm.
within their idea of what blackness is or what blackness and its engagement with the world. So to start stripping ourselves from some of these stories, this American black story
Mhm.
that I'm limited because I'm black, or I have to overcome this hurdle because I'm black, or I have to engage with this thing in a certain way because I'm black.
Yeah.
And instead, liberating yourself to be free from that story and just see how great you can be
Yeah.
without the story. And that's a challenge because, again, we've been conditioned to see ourselves in terms of this story. And
Mhm.
so when something happens, we re traumatize ourselves with this idea that there's something wrong with being black.
Yeah.
Whether there actually is or not,
Yeah.
the world still thinks there is. So I've got this problem I've got to face every day just going into to do business.
Yeah.
Uh, may or may not be true.
Yeah.
So, so my goal is to really facilitate a community that starts diving into that. One of the and what I think what I hypothesize it will create is um, just another degree, another focal point of building out or rebuilding Black wealth in this nation
Yeah.
that will allow us to flourish in so many other ways because the world is abundant. And when we tap into that abundance in ourselves and in the world, we get to live peacefully, we get to truly live freely, and we can face the trials and the things that are challenging in a way that allows us to be grown rather than coming under some destruction.
No.
Right? I don't have to be afraid of destruction. This is my path to growth. Um, I don't just have to endure. I get to thrive.
No.
Uh, so those things, helping people switch that mindset from survival back to service, and see what kind of world we can create because of it.
No. I know we gotta wrap this up here, even though I could. Yeah, we keep doing this forever. I enjoy.
Well, we can schedule another one for sure. But yeah,
Um,
definitely need to get to the next thing.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's been beautiful though.
yeah, man. The last thing I kind of want to mention, or one of the last things I want to mention, I think oftentimes when we're having this discussion around Black identity, and when people are like, oh, like what does it mean to be Black, or the
Hmm.
extra thought that goes into being Black when you're maneuvering through the world.
Yeah.
So the thing that I think we can see eye to eye on, there's a few things we see eye to eye on, but one of the things that I point that struck struck my mind was your exploration of Black professionals and entrepreneurs, where you're like, oh, is this the demographic? Is this the group that I really want to work with? There's an internal struggle that I heard you kind of mention, where you're like, is this really my mission? Like, is this what I want to
Hmm.
do? And I had similar things when I was exploring this job as a graduate fellow. I was like, I'm in an elitist liberal arts school, liberal arts college with limited, very limited people of color. There's an international population here, and there's a small percentage of folks of color, and an even smaller percentage of black students. And I struggled with that because that's just one of the things that I think some folks don't understand.
Hmm.
what I mean? Like that's the thought process. That's the thing that others might not have to really think about.
Hmm.
Where they're like, "Oh, it's a job. Oh, great. Yeah, the great environment, working environment, benefits are great." We feel like we might have a collective or a responsibility for the collective,
Hmm.
right? Like it's bigger than me. It's
Yeah.
bigger um than my professional development,
Yeah.
right? Who am I serving is very important, right? So I just wanted to mention that, and I think for anyone that's listening, maybe that resonates with them as well.
Hmm.
And those are examples that I think can be helpful for people who aren't either, if you're a person of color or part of a community where you feel that same way,
Yeah.
or you're exploring what that might feel like, oh yeah, I've heard people talk about like the stress or the extra that just goes into being black, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. But yeah, we're definitely going to do this again, man. I'm extremely grateful. Yeah, we'll have to do this again. Last thing before we sign off here, did you leave? um
Oh, I think my
maybe you're
yeah. Hold on just a second.
yeah, this is the technological technological godsend.
Yep. Computer.
Oh man.
Yep. My computer is just like,
No.
yeah, it's showing that it's plugged in, and it's been plugged in the whole time.
Okay. Oh, there it
It's
goes.
been plugged in the whole time, but then there's a yeah, it's just not charging right now. It's plugged in, but it's just
Whatever.
bugging out all of a sudden. So I
Well,
guess that's
that's a wrap. So before we go, if I can get you to reflect on something that you love or that you're in love with right now, and then share that with me.
yeah. Yeah, there's so much, man. So there's two things. This is gonna be a little strange, maybe. First one that came to mind was my son. Like I love my son. I've been so hard on his ass lately though. Like so I'm feeling the effects of and he's leaving tomorrow for like a week, going to Florida for a camp. And so I think I'm just kind of reckoning with like my deep love for him and what I feel like is not me showing him to where he can't doubt it. You know what I'm saying? Because I've been a little tough on him.
Mm,
But so I felt that as soon as you said it. And then when I think of what I'm in love with, man, yeah, it feels weird every time I say it, but there's just something about trees, man.
mm,
Something about trees that I'm just deeply affectionate about. And it's their wisdom, their long-standing uh, communities on the planet. Like there's so many different aspects to them, to where I literally, when I see trees, when I go on my walks every day, like just give nods of recognition. I have a tree in my front yard that it's a willow tree, but I just call her Willow,
mm,
and I literally feel this deep affection. Like, man, I'm in love with these trees,
yeah.
and it's a bizarre thing to say, but it's real. And I've been like that since I was probably like, I remember first talking to trees when I was probably a teenager. So a little strange, but the first thing that I think about the depth of my love was my son. And then the thing that I feel like I'm in love with is trees. Um, yeah, that's my answer.
Sounds wonderful to me, man. Well, thanks again. We'll be in touch. I got a couple ideas I want to bounce off of you
All right,
in terms of maybe some collaborative efforts.
absolutely.
How can we reach more people? But yeah, take care of yourself, man. I hope you have a good rest of your night, and we'll connect soon, man.
Definitely, man. Peace and blessings to you. Much love. I really appreciate this conversation, and let's definitely do it again soon. All
All right, cool, man.
right.